At the Wall Street Journal newspaper, the news section and the opinion section are separate divisions. Politically, the news section generally slants left, and the opinion section slants center-right. The slant of the news section becomes obvious after a close reading of the paper. First, by what is omitted. Any example of the daily incompetence of President Biden, his vice president, his press secretary, or other Democrats is usually treated as a non-event. You have to hear about it from another news source, talk radio, or see it discussed in the opinion section. Meanwhile, any old allegation about Trump, groundless as it may be, is treated as newsworthy. In this news clip, the reporter adopts the misleading, progressive term gender-affirming care for what are in fact gender-altering procedures. Using surgery and hormones to transform girls into boys, and vice versa, is misrepresented by the phrase gender-affirming care. Any reader can see it's actually gender-contradicting care at best. But, even the word care is too freighted with positive connotations, given the reality and the regrets that may follow such surgeries in youth. The reporter adopts the verbal twist of using gender to mean the opposite of a child's biological gender or sex, yet, the words sex and gender are synonymous in English. That's how we learned the language. A new sense of gender stipulated by a gay activist who wishes to tamper with the lexicon has no claim to validity. The article's tone and effect is to make the judge look good for blocking the bill. What creep would object to any sort of affirming care? But the judge is actually doing something hazardous to children. The reporter has obviously taken sides here. That's not objective reporting. And it's off-putting to many subscribers who can see through the verbal shenanigans of woke progressives, the outright tampering with established words, which denote things, in order to fool us about the things denoted. An assault on corporate diversity sounds bad. Who on earth would want to assault diversity? But notice no such thing is occurring in reality. It's really a legal assault on corporate discrimination by race. Diversity proper comes from equal opportunity. The progressive way of openly discriminating against whites and Asians and men, just because they are white or Asian or male, is a social evil to be stopped. Offenses are done against individuals, not against classes. Punishing more people today to make up for others punished long ago just increases the total harm of discrimination. But this headline tries to hide that fact. This reporter uses the loaded term diversity to give a misleading, yet pleasant, verbal facade to illegal discrimination by race. Again, careful readers can see through the wordplay and don't appreciate a newspaper trying to deceive them like this, as if to make something right seem wrong. Remember when Al Gore and Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams each claimed victory after their election losses? Did you ever see a headline in the Wall Street Journal or in any newspaper calling their claims false? Imagine seeing this in 2017, Hillary Clinton still falsely claims Trump stole the election with help from Russia. Never has the news division editorialized against a Democrat like that. Their track record proves it. Yet notice how often they call Trump's claims false as if it were a fact. That's a clear sign of taking political sides. And it's also a claim the reporters are in no position to make. Have they personally audited every ballot in all disputed counties to make sure the election results were fair? Did they verify that all legal ballots were counted? That no ballots cast by non-US citizens were counted? That no ballots were counted by people voting more than once? Until they can do all that, they are in no position to assess the election results as true or false. Neither is Bill Barr in a position to say voter fraud was not widespread, as he did, while he concedes that it occurred. Does he normally determine how widespread something is without first knowing how much of it exists? The truth is Biden doesn't even know for sure if he won the election, since he hasn't looked close enough. He just claims he did and tries to block all ballot audits and recounts in court. What does that say about his interest in the truth? President Biden has never met his initial burden of proof in claiming he won fair and square. And his claims have inspired no confidence by half the country, because they know the rich tradition of voter fraud in the Democrat Party, going back to Mayor Daley in Chicago. And how Democrats have kicked open every door to voter fraud they could over the years by opposing photo ID laws and proof of citizenship at registration, and by urging mass mailings of mail-in ballots. Then, after the election, they closed the doors to all voting fraud detection. If you don't look for welfare fraud, you won't find any, same goes for voting fraud. But as soon as you look for each, you find plenty. They didn't want courts looking for voter fraud in 2020 because they might not like what they found. Democrats have acted as if absence of evidence is the same as evidence of absence. But it's not. So, their reporting on Trump is not objective reporting. Why do they subject conservative readers to this sort of bias? They are making a mockery of objective reporting and turning the news division into an opinion section, of sorts. Meanwhile, in the letters section, we see precious space devoted to misleading, leftist rhetoric. If you want to catch up on the latest release from the Chinese Communist Party, look no further than the letters section, where you will also find the latest misleading rhetoric from the teachers' unions, the labor unions, and Democrat politicians in Chicago. Plus, climate change political science from discredited sources such as Michael Mann, who has never written anything persuasive on the topic that I've seen. The total acres burned by wildfires have trended downward over the past 120 years, not up. He uses ordinary weather fluctuations from summer heat as if it's proof of his theory of dangerous, man-made global warming. And he relies on the mindless wording of a news reporter to exaggerate the effects of carbon emissions as if it's a simple deduction with his necessarily when it's really a question of degree and induction, and the salient thing is the gross lack of evidence in proportion to his dire warnings. He relies on facile wordplay instead of discussing the science, scatterplots, correlation coefficients, the significance of R-squared, lurking variables, confidence levels, margins of error, his failed predictions, and the like. These non-rigorous, leftist letters crowd out other letters that could appear in their place. The letters section was better in years past, where good letters debunked the mainstream media spin on events more. Today, the leftist spin often just continues in the letters section. Good submissions are made, but they go unseen by readers. For example, Alicia Finley wrote a good article on the alarming levels of climate anxiety among young people today. It was timely, pressing, clear, and invited responses in the form of suggested remedies. No responses to it were published for 2 weeks until a San Francisco Institute teaching climate psychology wrote this letter. It alone got published in response to Finley's article. It merely speculates, on no evidence, that the floods and wildfires of today would not occur but for man's carbon emissions, when they know no such thing. Where does the ordinary, vicious weather through the centuries suddenly stop and man-made weather start based on their evidence? They have no clue. They merely pretend to know like ancient tribes doing a rain dance. They also warn that politicizing climate anxiety is dangerous to millions of people as if unaware that they are the chief offenders. They uncritically accept the socialist UN's political science on climate change, despite its inability to make a convincing case in the actual science and its history of false predictions, scare tactics, and money grabs. Readers may wonder what responses to Finley's article were excluded to make room for the one published. This letter, for example, was submitted within a few days of Finley's article. Note its content and rigor compared to the one published. What does this say about the judgment of the letter's editor? Is the opinion section of the newspaper going woke? There appears to be plain evidence of it, based on the sort of things that get published and those that do not.